Okay, and welcome to the second video on cost of production. And in this video, what we're going to be covering is this idea of average fixed costs. Okay, so what we're saying is or what we did say in the last video rather was this is how we calculate total cost. We draw our total fixed cost curve here. We put on top of that the total variable cost, and then what we can do is this line up here becomes the total cost curve, right? Now, look, for reasons that we can discuss later, and we're kind of starting to get into them now, what I want you to do if ever you are asked to draw these curves, is you would draw them like this. The total fixed cost curve does not change. For reasons that we will discuss later, the total variable cost curve has an unusual shape to it. Okay, so I just want you to see that, and I want you to put the total fixed cost curve here through the kind of inflection point. All right, not that important at all, but it looks best. And then therefore, what we do to get the total cost curve is we put this up on top. All we've done is shifted this directly upwards, and the difference between these two lines is the total fixed cost. Okay, now moving on to average fixed costs. So fixed costs, these are average fixed costs. So fixed costs are costs that do not change as output changes. Average fixed costs are fixed costs per unit of output. Remember that definition. Okay, now mathematically, how do we calculate this? Well, it's the total fixed cost, which is a number that doesn't change, divided by quantity, which is a number that does. Okay, so with that in mind, what I've done is I've just put a very, very simplistic table together. And I said, look, our fixed costs are going to be the same all the way through. Our total fixed costs, as I said, I use those terms interchangeably, but my advice is always say total fixed costs. Now, our total fixed costs are going to be €10,000 no matter what quantity we produce. So therefore, to find the average fixed costs, what we need to do is divide the fixed costs by quantity. So the idea is that if we produce 1 unit, our average fixed cost is 10,000 divided by 1, which is 10,000. Now, what I want you to notice here is that as output increases, what happens to average fixed costs? And I want you to understand why. Well, our fixed costs, if we produce 2 units, 2 computers like we were in the last example, well then that's 10,000 divided by 2, which is 5,000. So as we produce more and more units, our average fixed costs fall. If we produce 5 computers, 10,000 divided by 5 is 2,000. So what I want you to see is as output expands, our average fixed cost is constantly falling. Now that's good that you can recognize that, but I want you to understand why, which I will repeat later in the video, is that our fixed costs are a fixed amount. Our total fixed costs are a fixed amount of money in the short run. Okay, so therefore, what we are saying is that if we produce more and more units, essentially what we are doing is spreading out that fixed amount over a greater quantity. That is what we are doing. Okay, so therefore, as we produce more and more units, we are dividing a constant number, a number that doesn't change, by a consistently bigger and growing number. There are 2 ways to make a fraction smaller. One is you reduce the size of the top line. Well, fixed costs are on the top line. They're the numerator. So therefore, they're not going to change because that's the definition of them. But, they don't change as output changes. But another way to make a fraction smaller is you make the bottom line bigger. Okay, and what we're saying here is as we produce more output, quantity is on the bottom line, and therefore as we produce more output, average fixed costs fall. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a few separate examples. I would ask you to pause the video here, work them out, and check your answers again. So I won't spend too long, so just pause it as soon as you can and then press play once you have the answers. What I'm asking you to do is calculate average fixed costs in each of the next few questions. Okay, well, I hope you had a chance to do that. And what I'm just going to do is just put the answers in, and please compare your answers. And again, it does not matter what fixed costs are, what you will see is that as output expands, as output increases, average fixed cost mathematically must fall. Now, you may be getting bored, but I'll just ask you to pause it again, and then I work out average fixed costs, and then we'll check your answers. Again, I hope you had a chance to do that. So all I'm just going to say is just quickly just put in the answers here. And I'm sure you're getting bored of this and you're not even bothering pausing, but and why would you? But again, I just want to make the point that average fixed cost is consistently falling. And for this one, if you so wish, please pause the video now. And what I'm going to do now is put the answers in, okay? And this is, again, we are calculating average fixed cost. Now, don't forget, average fixed cost is fixed cost, a largely consistent number. As I have said previously, it can change, although it doesn't change as output changes, okay? But it can change. But what you really should notice is that this number is consistently falling. Now, therefore, how would we represent that in a graph? Okay, well, we would represent that by a falling number, or excuse me, falling graph curve. So this is the average fixed cost curve. We have costs up here and we have quantity down here. Now, what I would suggest you do is you pause the video and take your time to draw that down, but realize that we're going to be explaining its shape, and I want you to be able to explain why it is this way. Before I go on further, I do want you to see one thing. I'll actually go, yeah, this will work. Okay, this will be easy to see. What we have here, as output increases from 1 to 2, that is 100% increase. Average fixed cost falls by 1,000, which is a 50% reduction. But what I want you to know is originally it fell by 1,000, then it fell by like, what's that, 333.33 or whatever, and then it fell by 167.67, and then it fell by 100, and then it fell by like something like 76.67, and so on and so forth. The amount that average cost is falling as you add each marginal unit, as you produce one extra unit, is reducing. So please do keep that in mind, okay? That's something as well that I want you to see here. So as I said, I hope you just pause the video, draw that curve, and when you're ready, press play and we'll move on. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to do that. Now, what I'm saying here is I want you to understand absolutely in your mind why this is the way it is. The graph shows that the average fixed cost falls steeply at the start and then begins to flatten. We can see that that is boom, pretty much straight down, and by the end we're almost going across, even though we never ever will. Excuse me. It continues to fall as output increases, but at an increasingly slower rate. Now, why does it fall? Explain the shape of the average fixed cost curve. This is what we're doing. This is due to the fact that as increasing amounts of output are produced, fixed costs are being spread over a greater amount of output. If you only produce one good and your fixed costs are €10,000, all of those fixed costs have to be placed on that good if you're to retrieve your money, get all your money back. But if you produce 10,000 goods, your average fixed cost then is €1 per good. Because you are producing such a wide range of output, not a wide range, but a huge number of output, what you're actually finding is that the amount of fixed cost per good is less as you increase the quantity you produce. I'll say that again. The amount of fixed cost per good, the average fixed cost, is reduced as the amount of goods that you produce increases, okay? And this is what we're saying here, that as we produce more and more and more, average fixed cost is consistently falling. It is falling at a slower rate, but it is still falling. Okay, now it can never reach zero. All right, I don't know, we may have a few HL students for mathematics, but you supposedly need to divide by infinity, and we're never going to produce that because we can't, because we understand that economics is the study of scarcity, so therefore it will never reach zero. Okay, and don't forget how it's calculated. Average fixed cost is calculated by dividing the fixed cost, which is usually a constant number, by an increasing amount of output. Okay, usually if you're increasing output, you're dividing it by a bigger number. Now, With that in mind, I would sincerely ask you to pause the video, look at these questions, absolutely try and answer them, and then once you're ready, press play and we'll go through them. Okay, well, I hope you had a chance to do that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put up the answers here. So first thing is define the term average fixed cost. It's fixed cost per unit of output. How is it measured mathematically? Total fixed cost divided by quantity. Explain the shape of the AFC curve. It is constantly downward sloping at a decreasing rate as fixed costs are being spread over a greater range of output. That is a wonderful sentence. Each of these are wonderful sentences that you could put in to a perfect answer. Now draw the graph. It is that there simply. Okay, guys. Now, I really hope you understand that. There are things that you will have to learn off. Okay, this is a test of memory, intelligence, so on and so forth, your ability to concisely write answers. So you need to know the facts if you're going to have an informed answer. So I would ask you to rewatch this as many times as is necessary for you to be able to answer those questions and make those calculations.